I think this is a good time to start, and I believe at least my fellow panelists can hear me. So, great. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to all of you who have tuned in early. It's great to have you on. My name is Kemi Shegun, and I'm the managing partner of ACAS-Law. Today, we will be talking about the future of law. And I guess the question that arises is, why is that necessary? Why is it necessary to have to talk about the future of law? That's a simple question to answer. It's because the legal industry, just like almost every industry or sector around us, is changing. And COVID-19 has perhaps had the most global impact or influence on how we work today. But there had already been visible changes even before the coming of COVID-19, as seen in different jurisdictions, and which have most definitely impacted the way people work. Examples of these changes are reforms that have been seen in the judicial systems of different countries, the changing and varying choices of lawyers in deciding upon a career path, and the advent of different legal technologies and the use of artificial intelligence. And most certainly the use of virtual offices, which is now commonplace today. Here we are, a global phenomenon. We will talk about all of that this afternoon, but where is the Nigerian legal industry in the progressive push today? The future belongs to the competitive, the competent, and perhaps to the brave. So where does the legal industry stand in the race to be and remain relevant in the future? Now, I say that that's the trillion naira question. We would probably need a series of many episodes to exhaust all the perspectives that there are on the subject of the future of law. But to throw light on this subject, we have a most interesting faculty for a fascinating and multifaceted discussion. But before we go into that, I have a few housekeeping matters. The chat function will be disabled during the webinar to avoid distractions. All questions should be posted on the Q&A section, please, and these will be addressed after the question or the discussions with all the panelists. We will take as many questions as we can, but however, due to the management of time, any unanswered questions can be sent to flw@acas-law.com. And I encourage everybody present to continue the conversation on the future of law on social media using the hashtags #futureoflaw, #FLW. So with that done, I will hand you over to my co-moderator to set the scene further. My partner, Senior Partner ACAS-Law, Afolabi Caxton Martins. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Kemi. And it's good afternoon from me, and a very warm welcome to our distinguished panel, and to all of you who have taken the trouble and the time to join this webinar. We appreciate it. This event is scheduled for 90 minutes, but I implore you to try to stay to the end, because as Kemi has said, we discuss some very interesting and perhaps controversial subjects, and it promises to be a fascinating event. And just to add to what Kemi has said about the content, we will discuss the legal market in general, but not just the future of the practice of law, but also the future of the business of law and how the legal market has changed and continues to evolve, and what is driving this evolution. COVID-19 has certainly been an agent or a catalyst for some of the overnight changes that have taken place. And now, in order to get to the heart of the matter, I'd like to introduce our most distinguished panel. Our first panelist really needs no introduction. He's the Chief Law Officer of Lagos State and Commissioner for Justice, the Senior Advocate of Nigeria, a highly regarded litigator, jurist, legal analyst, and public speaker, our very own Honorable Attorney General, Mr. Moyesore Onigbanjo. We are also fortunate to have with us Mrs. Uju Othinal. Uju is licensed to practice law in Nigeria and Houston. She started her career with Chevron as in-house counsel and subsequently spent some time in private practice as a transactional lawyer with Zimmerman Law in Houston. She currently works with Seplat Petroleum Corporation as Senior In-House Counsel, where she has been since 2003. We're also extremely pleased to have with us Mr. Noor Kapti. Noor is an experienced commercial lawyer with particular expertise in oil and gas and private equity. He's the founding partner of Kapti Twala in South Africa, now Dentons, the world's largest firm. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Dentons Africa region. And of course, we are very excited to have with us Mr. Maury McLaren. Maury is co-founder of Lexington Consultants. He's a lawyer by training, he's practiced law, and holds an MBA in legal services. For more than 20 years, Maury has been advising global and international and independent law firms on strategy, organization, and expansion. In particular, Maury has been very busy advising leading Nigerian law firms on such challenging issues, including leadership strategy, ownership models, practice focus, remuneration, governance, and transitioning into an institutional practice. He completed the first ever benchmarking of the top Nigerian law firms. And last, but certainly by no means the least, we are very pleased to have with us Mr. Adeleke Alex Adedikwe. Adeleke is a corporate lawyer who specializes in technology, media, and telecommunications. He's the managing partner of Duale, Ovia, and Alex Adedikwe, DOA Law, a fast-growing full-service commercial law firm. Among his many talents, Adeleke is a staunch advocate for and routinely speaks and advises on data privacy and protection. We are really extremely grateful to all of you, our panelists, for honoring our invitation. Straight to the heart of the matter then. I would like to begin the conversation by talking about collaborations with in-house counsel. Would you, if I may turn to you first, beginning with the 2008 global recession and now COVID-19 pandemic, which according to experts is set to plunge the global economy into the worst recession since World War II, the legal industry, though resilient, has not been immune, and there have been definite shifts over time in the balance of power between the law firms and clients. Law firms no longer dictate what work is done, who does the work, and pricing. Our clients, who purchase our services, are now calling the shots. And just to add a little more context, legal budgets have slashed by 30 to 40%. I guess my first question is, what can we learn from how some law firms, some Nigerian firms, are responding to this challenge?
Thank you very much, Mr. Captain Martins, and allow me to stand on existing protocol in recognizing the honorable and the other distinguished panelists. It's a very interesting question that you've asked, and you are very correct. There has indeed been a shift in the legal services space, and that space is now purely driven by clients. And so what you find is the challenges that clients are going through will drive what kind of services they need and how much they're willing to pay for it. So I will give you an example from a client's perspective. Usually in-house counsel, for us to engage the services of a law firm, we have to work with the budget of the company. And that budget is determined by market and industry challenges, and of course the liquidity of the company. So if I can only pay so much for your services because I have to watch my bottom line, then I'm looking for a law firm who can stick by me and who will provide those services even in a tough time, because they are looking more to focusing on what the client needs and not how much they're getting paid to render the services.
Would you ask some of the approaches by some of these law firms, are they offering alternative fee arrangements, perhaps cap fees to induce you a bit forbearing on some of the fee notes that are outstanding. In terms of fees, are you seeing anything different?
Absolutely. Some firms have done very well with offering competitive and creative fee structures to clients to suit whatever challenges their business may be going through at the time. So one of the most successful fee structures that we have seen in-house is a risk-based approach, which is, I will support you on a particular transaction. If that transaction gets aborted midway, then all you have to do is pay me largely discounted fees. If, however, the transaction is successful, then you would pay me my fees plus a component of those fees that the firms regard as success fees. And you find that it demonstrates to the client that that firm is invested in seeing the successful completion of that transaction.
That's interesting. In addition to contracting legal budgets, there's competition from growing corporate legal departments. So legal departments are growing and they're keeping more work in-house. There's also competition from international law firms and alternative legal service providers, like the Big Four accounting firms, all of who bring multidisciplinary competencies and are very good at positioning themselves as trusted advisor and not trusted legal advisors necessarily. What are the gaps in competencies that Nigerian law firms can improve on to increase their influence and market share?
Look, so there is a very big difference, you're right, in being a legal advisor and being a trusted advisor. A trusted advisor is an advisor whose bottom line and objective is in sync with the objective of the client. And I think one of the things that firms today don't realize is, in order to be a successful service provider, you have to, one, know what the objective of your client is, and embed that objective in your strategy for service delivery. So I wonder how many firms actually sit around the table and think about what their client's business strategy for the year is, and think about ways in which they can support the client in delivering those strategies. Gone are the days when law firms would sit behind, or partners in law firms would sit behind large black leather chairs and wait for the client to come to them and say, I have a problem. Now, to be a successful trusted advisor, you have to get ahead of the business, see what the problem is, and come to the client and say, this problem is coming, and here's how you mitigate the problem.
Jay, I'm fully aligned with you about law firms and lawyers investing themselves in their clients' business. And I know, for instance, that Microsoft have over 1,200 lawyers globally. And they've decided, I think a few years ago, that they were going to move from the hourly billing to a retainer model, simply because they felt that, well, the other way around, what you would have is they would assign work to outside counsel, they'll do the work, and they get paid and they disappear. But they believe that with the retainer model, that they're likely to be more invested. When there are updates, they'll provide them. And anything that may affect the interest of the company would be something that would be of interest to them. So I agree with you that much more has to be done in that regard. But do you have any examples locally of how some of our own Nigerian firms are differentiating themselves to stay connected to their clients and promote new work?
Yes. So a perfect example is what's going on today with the work from home environment and the COVID pandemic. A lot of firms are using this opportunity to demonstrate their ability to reach clients no matter where they are and no matter what's going on in the environment. So technology is a perfect example of how clients are doing that, of how firms are doing that. I'll give you an example of what a firm that stood out to us did. at the beginning of the work from home situation. They realized that for us as an operator in the oil and gas industry, COVID-19 presented issues of force majeure. So very early, perhaps I wouldn't say before we thought about it, because in-house counsel, you're trained to be a proactive thinker. But certainly before any other firm came to us, this firm already started to send us what they tagged COVID-19 updates. The first update that they gave, and it would come on a weekly basis. So the first update that came in was force majeure, how to manage or mitigate situations of force majeure, and whether or not contractors were properly invoking force majeure. So they did that article and took it a step further by doing a webinar, which really detailed the levels of force majeure and what rights and protections an operator would have. So in our case, it became a reality for us where we had to look closer at our force majeure clauses and situations. And you can imagine which firm we thought of as soon as we had an issue that we needed support on. It was that firm.
I think that's an excellent example. And of course, we've seen other examples like the creation of a standalone resource, like a portal, covering some of the most recent considerations for business, dealing with issues like labor law, insolvency, cybersecurity, privacy laws, and as you say, force majeure. Yes, you're right.
Very much. Yeah, yes, I wanted to jump in here. I think it's a good place for Murray to come in on the subject of the alternative legal service providers positioning themselves as trusted advisor. So Murray, as global legal consultant, how does this really work in the international market where the alternative legal service providers work alongside the international law firms? How best would you say that Nigerian firms can learn from this to ensure that they also remain trusted legal advisor, not find themselves at the bottom of their own markets in the future?
Yeah, well, let me start by saying thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be with everybody. I have to have it. Let me start with a disclaimer. I'm a huge optimist, and I don't know if I'm talking with a panel of optimists or pessimists here, or whether we're talking to an audience who are optimists and pessimists. So you will notice that everything I talk about will be an opportunity, not a challenge for lawyers in Nigeria. So I've had the pleasure of working with Nigerian law firms for the last 20 years. One thing we do as part of our strategy projects is we interview clients and we interview domestic law firms and international law firms, and we try and get a picture for what are the gaps in the market for the local law firms. And one thing I have to start off by saying is that the first bit of feedback we get on any of our surveys of international firms is they are exceptionally impressed by the quality of lawyers in the Nigerian law firms. We have to be really clear. We're not talking about an old-fashioned legal market, or we're not talking about a legal backwater. So people are very, very impressed by the quality of lawyers that they see. They will then say a second later, within the way that services are delivered, there can sometimes be a shortfall, but they tend to view lawyers as individuals more than firms. So we do have in Nigeria a few major institutionalized firms, but outside those, it's really a case of picking the lawyers you want for the case than the firms that you want. And let's be honest, for those firms that are doing international cross-border work, they have to work in exactly the same way as any of the other law firms because their clients expect that, and they have to have all of the internal systems. So we're seeing a very fast and rapid process of modernization for the Nigerian law firms. The challenges that I see, and maybe the opportunities that I see, is firstly, let's talk about people. We're seeing huge changes in generations around the world, and Nigeria is having very particular challenges around the way that they recruit and they retain their right lawyers. I'm going to be arguing today that one result of COVID is only that the change we're going to see is much more rapid in Nigeria than we would expect. That the major firms we're going to see will have more international tie-ups with law firms, and that the mid-size and the smaller law firms will inevitably be pushed together to merge because of the way that costs are increasing within legal services in Nigeria. And if you want to talk about what the costs are, we can talk about that. So one thing we find in markets that become international is those firms that have an international relationship suddenly become much more appealing to the local lawyers when they're at the Nigeria, when they're in the Lagos Law Faculty and they're recruiting. Suddenly people find those international firms much more exciting for them. So there's something about people that is a challenge at the moment. The second one, of course, is about clients. So the international firms are much more sophisticated in the way they can manage clients globally. They can manage flows of work from different legal markets, and they are exceptional at the way they do their day-to-day marketing. So those are two particular challenges that I see for the law firms. And I mentioned a bit about the cost of delivery. We've seen over the last 5 to 10 years this very unhappy, you could almost call it a perfect storm in Nigeria. Law firms are going through a modernization process, and there's been a period of economic uncertainty. We can talk about the challenge of COVID, or we can say, actually, compared to the state of the Nigerian economy, COVID is only just one of a number of other challenges that they have. And unfortunately for firms, young people have been looking for pay rises, people have been looking for benefits. The back office requirement in terms of technology, learning and development, knowledge management, to name a few, the costs are increasing at a time where there is exceptional price pressure from clients. So that's my thinking. The last thing I would say is, when we talk about how will the Nigerian law firms change and what will be the challenge to the market, we have to be very clear that we're talking about very different type of animals, and we have to be very careful we're not comparing a banana to an apple. We have to compare an apple with an apple. So maybe goes back to me being a huge optimist. For the elite law firms, I think that they will still be following the classic law firm model. They will still be partnerships, because we know there will always be the client who has a bête de range need for a top law firm, and they will look for that elite law firm to do that. And we haven't seen yet anything better than a partnership model to achieve that. There is, however, a much larger amount of standard work that's being produced by law firm, but by clients. Some clients are resourcing up to do that standard work, but the majority will continue to outsource that. And that's why the Nigerian law firms have a very big strategic challenge. Are they going to go for that elite work where the clients will still pay top fees? Or are they going to embrace that standardized work? And going forward, as we talk about throughout this session, we'll hear about technology, we'll hear about different models for running your law firm. If anybody does want to do that standard work, the current model isn't doing that very, very well. And the options going forward will be using more corporate approaches to legal services, bringing in new different types of people, as we'll be hearing. There's work for paralegals, there's work for technologists, there's another range of people. So will the law firms embrace the elite, and we'll see them continuing in the current model because it remains to be successful? Legal fees in Nigeria are exceedingly high. You do have brilliant lawyers that are being called upon, they're in high demand. Or will law firms decide to think about the lower value, more standardized work, which is increasing incredibly, and adopt different models to service that?
Thank you, Murray.
So clearly, I mean, Murray he's an optimist, and hope springs eternal. We are optimists as well, but it's clearly about, cost efficiency, being effective with the work that you do as well, because we do need to be as efficient as the international law firms as well. Just one point, you did say that, Nigerian lawyers' fees are quite high. I guess if you're going to compare them to the fees of international counsel, they would not be quite high. So, we're putting in the same amounts of work, and we don't think that our fees are quite high. We do the work and we expect to be paid. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a question there that you are a frontier market, and being a frontier market, there will be a higher legal risk for businesses. And those businesses will need to pay for those top lawyers that will help them manage those particular risks. Now, we prepared some votes to put to you as an audience. And technology willing, we wanted to find out as we go through what your views are on some different questions. So let me try this for you. You can tell me, Kemi and Afolabi, if this is working, whether the questions have come up in front of everyone's screens.
I can see that.
Yes. What is driving change within legal services in Nigeria? Yes.
Brilliant. So what we're going to do, we're going to answer these one by one, and let's ask everyone to look at question one only, and please vote and tell us what your answers are. And Kemi, do you want to continue while we give people a few minutes to vote, and then after the next period, then we'll come back and have the results.
All right then, Falabi, over to you.
All right. Well, I had a few issues with Murray, but I think that we've spent quite a bit of time on that subject. But let me just pivot and ask you just one final question for the time being. We have some lawyers in attendance, including young lawyers, who may not have considered going in-house as a career option. What advice can you give them, and what are some of the pros and cons to consider? If you could just give us a couple of tips in just a couple of minutes.
So what I would say about in-house is ultimately it's great having one client that you focus on and you dedicate your knowledge to. But what I would say to young lawyers overall is you should look for an organization that has the right structure to develop your competencies. It could be in-house, it could be with a law firm, but you really want to look into that organization and find out what programs do they have in place to help you bridge the gap from the knowledge you acquired in law school to the skill that you require to practice law. And there is a gap because what you've learned in law school is quite different from law in practice. And so you should really look for an organization that has a program. If I may give an example, in CETLAC, we have a graduate trainee program. It's a 4-year program where we lay out in detail the skills that we require young lawyers to learn and develop over a 4-year period, so that by the time they complete the program, they will be able to advise the business with little to no supervision.
Thank you, Uju. I know the mindset is also quite different. Somebody said to me that as far as in-house counsel are concerned, they're invested in the business, of course. And so when there's a problem, they consider it to be a business problem rather than a legal problem. And they use the law as a tool, whereas lawyers see a legal problem and that's what they're excited about. So there is a change in mindset there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're very right. The key thing for in-house counsel is to be commercial minded. And even for firms that are looking to be a trusted advisor to a business, you have to be commercial minded. So it's not just about what the law says, is you start off from the point of what is a client's objective? And how can I build a legal framework around that objective so that I enable the business, as our general counsel likes to say. Lawyers, we should be business enablers. We should look for ways to use the law to help the business achieve their objectives and not just tell them this is what the law says you can or cannot do.
Thank you, Joe. Very insightful. Thank you, Murray. Honorable Attorney General, if I may turn to you, sir, to discuss reforms, in particular, related to our justice delivery system and the legal framework for delivering legal services. First, the lockdown exposed weaknesses in the Nigerian justice delivery system. The judiciary was paralyzed during the lockdown, but we know that Ekiti State enacted the Administration of Justice Bill, and Ogun State, in collaboration with the Justice Reform Project and other stakeholders, have produced the Administration of Civil Justice Bill, designed as a model law to reform and modernize the justice delivery system. So clearly, lawyers seem to have adapted quite quickly to the overnight changes forced by COVID-19, but the courts have not. What steps have or is Lagos State taking to modernize our justice system to make it more robust, efficient, and effective?
Thank you. Thank you, Afolabi. Let me first acknowledge how privileged I am to sit amongst an eminent array of panelists and also to be invited to talk on the issues which you have raised. For Lagos State, our approach to this issue of access to justice, particularly during the pandemic, has been two-pronged. One, we're looking at legislation to reform, and also we're looking at upscaling infrastructure. So during the pandemic, I think Lagos State was in the forefront of ensuring that our courts adopted virtual sittings as a way out of the complete shutdown, which occurred in the courtrooms. So we advocated for the Lagos State Judiciary to issue practice directions, which enabled some matters to go on remotely. We also filed a matter at the Supreme Court, using the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction to have the Supreme Court pronounce on whether virtual hearings were constitutional or not. That matter was decided, although the matter was struck out, but the court did pronounce that virtual hearings were not unconstitutional, thereby giving courts all over the Federation the leeway to fully embrace virtual hearings. In terms of the administration of civil justice law, we are also in partnership with the Justice Reform Project. With regards to that bill, we set up a joint committee with them. We have a draft. Right now, we are engaging stakeholders. We're engaging the judiciary. We're engaging the legislature, after which the final draft, agreed to by all the stakeholders, will be forwarded to the State House of Assembly to be passed into a law. We have also looked at, so what has happened in the criminal proceeding space in terms of the advances we recorded when the administration of criminal justice law was passed. If you recall, anybody who has practiced in Nigeria before the advent of that bill will recall that conducting criminal trials was quite frustrating. Those trials never got concluded because of various objections that will be raised, which had the effect of preventing the substantive matter from going on. But with the advent of that law, it eliminated stay of proceedings of the substantive matter, and then we started making great advancement in our criminal practice. We in Lagos State have also operated that law. We were the first to enact that law into operation. We've operated that law now for a couple of years, and we've also identified certain gaps. And that has led us again to convey another stakeholders meeting, which is leading to the House of Assembly currently considering an amendment to that law. So that also, apart from the administration of civil justice law, which is coming up, we are also amending the administration of criminal justice law. There's so many innovations in the new bill, but part of which is to accommodate video testimonies by video conferencing and virtually, so that the witnesses don't have to be physically in the courtroom for them to give their evidence. We also, as a state, deliberately are funding alternative disputes mechanism. So we set up the Lagos Multi-Door Courthouse. This is an institution which serves as a clearinghouse for all matters filed in the courts, civil matters in particular, where all parties are enjoined to have attempted some form of ADR or the other before the matters are permitted to go into the dockets of the civil courts. That institute is very much strengthened. They're doing quite a tremendous amount of work. Apart from that, there's also in-house in the Ministry of Justice what we call citizens mediation centers. We have spread this across about 20 local governments and LCDAs in Lagos State. And their job basically is that we know that we have loads of disputes between people in several communities. And what they then do is that they mediate all these disputes. So you see two neighbors having a minor issue or minor squabble, rather than going to congest the court's dockets, the CMC serves as a clearinghouse. And really, if I can just look at the statistics here, I think so between January to July of this year, they received 9,567 matters, 8,686 were mediated, and 7,078 were resolved. So this goes to show you that that's about 9,500 cases which the CMC has prevented from congesting our courts dockets. So the Lagos State government, we support all these institutions with the funding that is required. In terms of infrastructure, because we recognize that the state is wide, and sometimes people in rural areas have to travel kilometers just to be able to physically get to a courtroom. So we're upscaling infrastructure. So in Etiosa, for the first time, we commissioned high court and magistrate court buildings. Also in Imota, which is in Ikorodu, a court structure is also coming up. There's also another structure, about 12 magistrate courtrooms coming up in Egbeda area. So the Lagos State government is also trying to ensure that every area has a facility, either a citizens mediation center or a courtroom right next door or within proximity to the citizens, so that they can then access it if need be. Lagos State at the frontier and continue to push for reform in the justice sector. So the constitution that we operate, unfortunately, has what we call the exclusive and the concurrent list and the residual list. Unfortunately, you find that most of all the issues upon which reform is based is in the exclusive legislative list. So, but what we're doing is, nevertheless, we are engaging with the federal authorities and ensuring that we encourage and push them to reform where necessary. We're canvassing that, the federal government, for example, should let go of so many things that the states really should be within the remit of the states. And luckily, it's the same party in government at the center and in some of the states. And we're making progress along these lines.
Thank you very much, dear Attorney General. Just jumping here, I think it's good to know that there's certainly a lot of things that are going on in relation to reform. Some that may not be readily available in terms of information to the Nigerian legal market, but clearly reforms are ongoing. I'd just like to move it now from the government perspective to the private perspective, and I'll ask Adeleke to come in here. You're a practicing lawyer. From your perspective, one working within the system, what would you say are those things that need to be addressed to bring the administration of our justice system into the reality of the 21st century?
Thank you very much. And thank you to the organizers, ACAS-Law, and it's a pleasure being here. I think that I feel highly privileged speaking in the midst of everyone here. And in addition to that, I must start by saying that there can't be a better person to speak to the reforms currently going on in Lagos State than the Honorable Attorney General himself. And I think he's done a lot of justice to that conversation. But again, just to add in, I must also chip in to say that I commend their efforts in testing the constitutionality in relation to the hearings, the Zoom hearings, and all of those opportunities that COVID had brought into the system. Generally, I would say that, by my own understanding, it's the effort of the Lagos State government in terms of reform system didn't start with COVID. They had imputed a few other things prior to now. E-filing system had been done in Lagos State before now. Lagos State has started case management systems and a few other opportunities that had been brought in. I guess COVID has just come to fast track a lot of these things, and it has put us in a place where we don't have a choice but to continue to drive those reforms. Whilst these things are ongoing by the Lagos State government, it is also important that as we get along and we start to ease out to what people call the new normal, I call it the new abnormal, we also need to ensure that we do not backtrack on some of the achievements that we've made, and we just need to double up on some of these things. For example, we can take this opportunity to be able to work on backlogs and create more access to justice. I'm also happy about what the Honorable Attorney General had mentioned in relation to community dispute resolution systems and all of those opportunities that the reforms have created. We need to try as much as possible to ensure that some of those processes are digitized in such a way that people don't necessarily have to travel. Opportunities are created for them to be able to have remote conversations by themselves. And also importantly, again, I know some of the worries that lawyers and a few people have shared is in relation to the privacy and the security of some of these platforms that have been created. For example, is it safe enough for me to use a Zoom platform to be able to have a court hearing? I think, again, we can also take the opportunity here. To ensure that we can leverage on our vital and ever vibrant technological community in Nigeria to build our own platform. Lagos State, for example, the judiciary can build platforms, specific bespoke platforms for itself to ensure that it is duly protected, and they can create an opportunity whereby we don't really have to employ the services of the Zooms of this world, but we can have our own kind of platforms that would ensure that this becomes a part of us to go. And these are things that I think should be, I'm quite optimistic. I believe that with the Honorable Attorney General, the Lagos State government, and the judiciary, these things are not far from us. We just need to also continue to encourage them and see that we can get a lot more progress.
Thank you very much, Adeleke. Disruptive thinking, that's what we need.
Absolutely.
Mr. Attorney General, I have another question, which is a little controversial. And forgive me for the long preamble. It's not so long, but I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. In 2007, the Legal Services Act was passed in England and Wales. It was the result of the Clementi Review in 2004, which raised concerns about the outdated regulatory methods of the legal profession, as well as law firms overcharging due to lack of competition. The main changes were liberalizing the business structures through which lawyers can operate by permitting ownership and investment by individuals not qualified as lawyers and allowing legal business access to external capital. They wanted to promote competition and foster innovation. They also set up an external office for legal complaints so that the legal market would no longer be regulated solely by lawyers. In Nigeria, lawyers cannot partner with non-lawyers or with lawyers not admitted to practice in Nigeria for the purpose of practicing law. However, alternative business structures and multidisciplinary firms like the big accounting firms are practicing law in Nigeria and thriving. In your opinion, is a similar review of the Nigerian legal services market required? And before you answer, let me pose this to you. Do you think we should promote reforms to protect consumers or maintain rules that protect lawyers from competition?
Thank you very much. I mean, to my mind, that is quite easy. I mean, the clients should take pride of place. The consumers should take pride of place. And if there should be any reform, it should be one that should ensure that the consumers of our services are better off. So to my mind, I would fully embrace the kind of reform that the Legal Services Act regime put in place in the UK. Because, I mean, you know, we cannot, with the Legal Practitioners Act, which restricts us from partnering with people who are not qualified as lawyers, and in fact prescribes disciplinary measures against any lawyer who undertakes a practice with a non-lawyer. I think it's time we took a look, we looked at it and amended to bring it in line with the realities of the day. And allowing non-lawyers to partner with lawyers will do two things to my mind. It will, just like anybody, any company that goes into the capital market, it will provide additional and enormous resources, financial resources, for that firm to upscale its technology, upscale its capacity, and also deepen its institution as a firm. So then, because if people can invest in a firm and they see it as an organization, they are putting in their money for returns, for profit, then that institution is likely to survive its partners. It's likely to be better run. It's likely to have more regulatory, internal regulatory control. Looking at the regulation itself, so right now the disciplinary process is governed by the Legal Practitioners Disciplinary Committee, which I was also privileged to be one of the prosecutors there. Whilst I was there, I mean, you know, I noticed that it was kind of, if I can use that word, a graveyard for disciplinary matters, you know, because for various technical reasons, it would take years to conclude one case, not due to the fault of the committee, but, you know, people just exploiting all kinds of loopholes available in the law. And then, of course, there's a lot to be said for esprit de corps, you know, because we regulate ourselves. Your friend or your acquaintance comes up. Not so many people are that objective, we need to admit to ourselves. So I think it's high time we also embraced regulation by non-lawyers, you know. We have nothing to lose for it, you know. So far, the laws, the rules guiding whatever they're going to do will be clear. We would also not be reinventing any wheel, but importantly, we'll stop playing the ostrich, because we know that, you know, there's a lot wrong with our disciplinary and regulatory processes. And I mean, the sad thing is nothing really as of now is being done. The people who are doing it are saddled with almost an impossible task, given the regime that they're operating in. So I fully embrace, let us have in place where non-lawyers can partner with lawyers to bring in additional financing, to bring in expertise in terms of maybe, be it accounting, be it technology, what have you. And also, we need to have a regulatory system where you have non-lawyers on board so that they bring a different perspective. So because we sit pretty and think that within ourselves, well, I mean, you know, nobody sees you better than the person looking at you. I think that's what we need to embrace, and I fully circumscribe to that, and I would recommend it whenever I get the opportunity to. Unfortunately, like I said, this is one of the things which only the federal government, by virtue of the exclusive legislative list, is permitted to legislate upon. You could be rest assured that if this was within the remit of the Lagos State, we would certainly be talking about it seriously now. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for your extremely frank contribution, Attorney General. Open and global and progressive, and what we need. Murray, you need to chip in here. Falabi spoke about the 2007 UK.
Yes, yeah.
Let me just ask, what does that do to the traditional legal practice industry? I mean, do you think that in countries where there's still steep competition for the available work, that it will mean a steady contraction? Because these are the sorts of things that need to be understood from that perspective. What is the real message here? Is it something that should be encouraged, as the Attorney General has said?
Well, just to say, I listened very, very carefully to what the Attorney General was saying. I'm sitting writing notes here. My feeling is that change is inevitable. The rate of change is the key, but change is inevitable. And I'm from the United Kingdom. I've seen the reforms in the UK. Some of the things worked well, some of them didn't. And if you want to, we can talk about how and why. But it's only inevitable that certain sectors of the economy will change. And it's only inevitable that law firms will become more like businesses, and businesses will want to invest and want to get involved in law. So my office is in London, but I live in Madrid. Madrid and Spain is one of the most conservative legal professions, where the government isn't willing in any way to open up the legal profession to non-lawyers and to outside investment. And that legal market is going through revolution at the moment, because we're seeing alternative providers, we're seeing multidisciplinary practices, we're seeing the Big Four doing this. Lawyers are very clever and able people, and they will be able to find the pockets and the areas where clients will want their issues solved. So I couldn't agree more. Again, to go back to the fact I'm a huge optimist, Kemi, I think that competition is only a good thing within legal services. And if anybody wants to argue that we have to keep out anyone outside law because it keeps our prices higher, it allows us to keep the terrain to ourselves, I would question that. I don't think that's good for anybody. The challenge will be, in Nigeria, there are a lot of very small practices who have not been very business-oriented in their approach. And those are the people we have to think of when we look at this change. But I listened very carefully to what Adeke was saying. We have to listen to the young generation. And I'm saying that because I'm past a significant birthday. We have to listen to the younger generation. They are the ones that will grab this future and make it. And whether or not government support this or not, that is totally inevitable, that law firms like DOA are there to follow their example. I'm just very interested to hear this, and I think that it would be a very positive development if Nigeria was to go down this path.
Thanks very much, Maria. I like the way when you're pushing globalism, you always do that with a smile. I was going to ask Adeleke to contribute here, but maybe when he's talking about something else down the line, he can touch on this subject. So Falabi, over to you to go on with Noor, please.
Oh. Thank you, Kemi. Well, let's talk technology. By now, we have all heard that technology is a major threat or disruptor to the traditional ways of delivering legal services. And while other industries have embraced technology and are thriving because of it, the legal profession has been slow to embrace it, perhaps because lawyers are risk-averse and conservative by training. Dentons, however, has taken a different approach. it launched new technology under a wholly owned subsidiary called ACAS-Law Labs. Noah, let me ask you, why is Dentons invested in the development of legal technology?
So thank you, Afolabi. And firstly, it is again for me too a privilege to be in the presence of such esteemed panelists. Thank you very much. To turn to the question more directly, Dentons' involvement in investment in technology, I think can be traced back to 2015 and really must be seen as a consequence of the 2008-2010 recession and post-recession kind of response. So not very different to what we're going to expect post-COVID-19 in terms of economic slowdown, and we will see responses, and we'll see similar brave and bold responses in many industries, including the legal profession. I think it is a natural consequence. At Dentons, we have great plans to meet kind of what we refer to as the new dynamic, not necessarily a new normal, not necessarily an abnormal normal, but certainly accelerated. And so that's challenging for lawyers, as you have identified. And so the Dentons investment in 2015 was really in something called Next Law Ventures. It was a seed capital fund supporting technologists, but also lawyers turned technologists who were beginning to develop a series of technologies or legal tech, so to speak. The fund has been extremely successful and have invested in a number of what's today products, interestingly used more often by our competitors, other big law firms, than us, because it is so widely demanded. So we developed this Next Law Ventures as a venture capital fund. But alongside that, very interestingly, we also developed something called Next Law Labs. And Next Law Labs was driven internally to serve as a catalyst for what it is that we could develop for clients. Often have conversations with in-house counsel and say, how do you see your business developing? And in particular, how do you see technology being deployed in your business to drive efficiencies in your legal function, to drive cost efficiencies? As we've heard today, there is increasing focus on reducing legal costs. We saw a marked kind of emphasis on this post the financial recession. I think we're going to see a very similar pressure on pricing moving forward post-COVID-19. I think our in-house counsel is going to be under pressure, and really what we're all looking to is technology and technology investment. So I think it was the Institute of Legal Technology Association that indicates in a research survey that they undertook, 100% of the firms with more than 500 lawyers, now these are pretty large firms, right? All of them are invested in AI or in AI technologies. What this tells us is that clearly this is expensive technology. But interestingly, the more investment in the technology, the lower the cost. And so this technology is becoming available to others. So I hope Afolabi, that gives you a sense of where Dentons sits, what it expects to do post-COVID-19, what it's done, and why the investment in technology, driven almost exclusively by difficult conditions and difficult conditions that affect our clients.
Thank you, Noah. I'm going to ask you a question about artificial intelligence and whether robots are going to take over the jobs of lawyers. But before I do that, I'm just going to read two quotes that I came across. The first one is by a gentleman called Jimoh Obiageli. And Jimoh Obiageli is of Nigerian parentage, and Jimoh founded Ross Intelligence. And Ross Intelligence is a technology that basically is like a super Siri. And what it does is that you ask it questions and it gives you the answers, and it can actually read 1 million pages in under a minute. And not just does it give you the correct paragraphs that you require, it gives you links and so on. But this is what Denton said, and there are 2 quotes I'm going to read you. Jimo said, Denton said, we would rather own the technology rather than compete with it. So I'm just trying to get the mindset of the company. And then your global chair, Mr. Joe Andrews, said, we don't want to just be the world's largest law firm. We want to transform the legal profession, drive innovation in legal services, and bring clients what they want with better quality, more responsiveness, and greater value. So before I go to the question about whether robots or AI is going to take over, it seems to me that Denton's approach is more that technology, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, I'm looking forward to your answer, is there to augment the services that lawyers do rather than take over. But anyway, I'm going to still put it to you because everyone asked this question. There is a fear that AI, robots, will take over the role of lawyers. And apart from that, let me put this to you. According to McKinsey and PwC, they say that at least 20% of the work that lawyers do is routine and repetitive and can be done through automation. So jobs may be lost, but perhaps the technology on the converse will increase the jobs. But what is your take? Are you grafting the technology on to improve your work, or are you seeing a transformation of the market gradually?
So Afolabi, let me say right up front, I know that I'm in a room with the eternal optimists, and so yes, More, I play for the same team, right? I don't envisage a world where there are no lawyers, but I do see how we're going to be working differently and how we're going to be doing things for our clients differently. And clearly this is directed by the client. So the client wants more for less. If a technology exists that allows for them to get more for less, and I want to stay in this business, then I absolutely have to be able to deliver more for less. And so I see technology as being complementary to what we do. So we all know, look, we know that AI is fantastic, that it's developing. We know that it is initial entry is expensive, but let's talk about Ross. I mean, and I'm very proud of Ross, one, because Denton is a key investor, but also because it is really, I think, an African development, okay? And I'm excited about that. But Ross is now available at $69 US dollars per user and can be paid for on a monthly basis. So if this technology to read 1 million pages in a minute is available and support research, which most of our US lawyers depend on, then I think it is incumbent upon us firstly, and secondly will be demanded from our clients that we deploy these technologies. Are our clients expecting to be talking to a robot? Absolutely not. And let me tell you why I think so, Afolabi. There are 2 things that I think Ross, Watson, and everybody else in that category of great thinkers is never going to be able to replace. The one is emotional quotient, and the other is insight. And you know, whether it's a transaction, whether it is a litigation, the level of human anxiety attached to whether it's a corporation or an individual is never going to be, not, I think in my time, never going to be replaced by a artificial intelligence. Finally, on that topic, let me say that there are people who believe, and I've spoken to clients who say to me that they think the law firm of the future is not a law firm trying to peddle technologies, but a technology firm trying to peddle law. So I'm not there yet. Let me say I am not there yet. But I certainly believe in the challenge of replacing emotional quotient and insight, most importantly, insight.
Thank you very much, Noor. Interesting. Maury, let me bring you in here. What's your view in this? I mean, from your perspective, is artificial intelligence, legal technology going to be that thing that will separate the boys from the men or the girls from the women? Is there you know, no survival for the lawyers or for the firms who don't take the path of legal tech or artificial intelligence.
Isn't it interesting? I couldn't agree more with what everything Noor said. We just started a project for one of the Nigerian firms. It's technology. It's not a standard firm doing low value work. It's one of the elite firms understanding that technology will be more important going forward. Now, this is one of the questions that we asked everybody in the survey at the beginning, and this is probably a good time to check back. Can you see the survey results on your screen there?
Yes.
I can.
Wonderful,
Yes.
wonderful. So the question we asked in what we'll do, we'll share the results with everyone afterwards. The questions we wanted to ask under technology is, firstly, will technology will never replace a lawyer's wisdom. Now, wisdom is very interesting for me because that one approach for legal services is that responding to a client's requirement is like a decision tree, and you have some binary decisions to make. And if we look at other areas where we say that technology could never achieve things, we only have to look at the ability of technology to drive a car. And is driving a car about skills, or is driving a car about making a number of decisions? And I was so surprised to read on CNN last week that the Americans were doing trials with one of their fighter jets using artificial intelligence, and that the jet fighter, driven by artificial intelligence, was much more effective than any of their top pilots. So if we think that law is rule-based, then of course any technology will be able to support that. No? So any technology can help. The second question, new technologies can provide sophisticated support to most expert lawyers. I think this is Noor's point, really. This for me is the most important part. There is something about insight, and there is something about emotional intelligence. And when we talk about the elite legal services, we don't ever imagine that technology can replace the insight of the top lawyer. But we can see how it can enhance the lawyer's work, just as we've seen with all of the work that IBM Watson has now been working with Dentons. But if you look at the work that IBM Watson is doing within cancer treatment, the technology will enhance the top lawyer and actually make them better able to decide by giving them the data required. But if you notice from the voting, 70% of the people watching agree with point number 3. Technology is going to inevitably change the delivery of standard legal services. Now, the challenges that law firms have had is, without the ability to decide, are we doing the higher value work or are we doing the lower value work? Many of our top law firms have been doing a lot of this lower value work automatically. And Afolabi, you were saying that McKinsey say that maybe 20% of legal work could be done through technology. I would actually place it much higher from the work that I've been doing. I would say maybe 40% of the services done by law firms can be done by technology. Now, if that is true, and I think it is, that will inevitably cause huge challenges within the way law firms currently structure. Firstly, to go back to the point of the Attorney General, we don't need to have lawyers doing the work because whole new careers are opening up for people that are paralegals, that work in technology, and that are going to be better able to business manage legal services. But if our junior lawyers are not doing that day-to-day work because technology does it better, how will we do their learning and development? What opportunities will there be for some of our junior lawyers? So I agree with everything that Noor was saying. I think the technology is good news because it enhances the work that we want from our top lawyers. But beware those law firms and those lawyers that are actually doing the day-to-day standard work. And maybe to finish off, I know it's a very honest point. I don't think junior lawyers enjoy doing some of the day-to-day work that they have to do, putting information into some of the documents that they do. And if technology starts taking off our hands some of the day-to-day compliance type boring work for junior lawyers, I can only see that as a positive thing going forward.
Thanks very much, Maury. So I guess we're saying that law firms or lawyers that don't take the path of legal tech, they will survive to a certain extent, but it will separate the men from the boys.
Well, yeah, no, very good. So to go back to the point earlier, we thought it was the work, we thought it would be the firms doing the cheap and low value work that are focused in technology, but it's the, if you look at the uptake of artificial intelligence, it's the elite firms that's looking very carefully at that. As we heard from the client earlier, there's going to be constant fee pressure that will never go away. So anything that can be leveraged has to be leveraged. Anything that can be disaggregated and done by technology will be done by technology. But that doesn't mean to say there's not going to be a smart lawyer there who's actually giving his insight and wisdom into that process.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Maury. Falabi.
So let's get practical. So in our day-to-day work, how are law firms using this technology to deliver services faster, cheaper, and better, in a nutshell? And people want to know what the low-hanging fruit is, assuming they want to get started. What are they using it for? Is it just purely research work, or what else is there?
Well, Afolabi, I think, as technology has developed, the range of capabilities and applications have also been enhanced. And as Maury has said, initially there was this notion that technology is going to be used or utilized to take away what lower value work and the bottom dollars. That's not exactly true. When we look at how we deploy technology today, let's look at those areas in due diligence, contract review, right? Other than just legal research, electronic discovery. So we have AI systems that give us up to 94% accuracy rate under testing conditions. We use prediction technology, for example, software that generates results that forecast litigation outcome based on the learnings of similar cases. Now that is something that there's lots of criticism about. The reality is, the more criticism there is about it, the more uptake of the technology there is. Legal analytics, we use data points from past case law and look at win-loss rates to judge the history and to be able to develop trends and patterns and speak to clients about that. We talk about document automation. Our document automation has been around for a while, but we see enhanced applications that I will speak to. And then, of course, most importantly, I think, from a legal management, a law firm management point of view, because it's one thing, I believe, to be able to deploy technologies to get faster, better, cheaper. On the other hand, if you don't have pricing correct in your organization, you may not be around long enough to be able to invest and seek appropriate return on investment in that technology. So we begin to see the use of AI technology and other business tech that's really enhanced to be able to support billable hours that are computed automatically, for example, I think is the lowest hanging fruit. And this is really what clients are demanding. I think of one technology, Aperio, where a major global client has deployed this and insists that all of their panel firms use this technology. And what this technology really does, it's a ticker that allows them to see what they're spending with which law firms on any day, any month, and anywhere in the world. And so we see the deployment of AI in that, and also, of course, how to predict the cost based on budgets. Of course, you have to be a very big client to be able to do that. So in almost what we're beginning to see, Afolabi, is that in almost every aspect of the practice of law, both delivery of service and product, as well as running the law firm, is where there's increasingly a reliance on business technology and driven business technology powered by, in many cases, artificial intelligence.
Thank you, Noel. So assume that some of us are novices and want to get started. How do we go about modernizing our firms with technology? What do we do? You start with the oldest technology, which is a pen and paper, and then make a list of what's working in our firms and what isn't, or do we just go to Google? Or what are your recommendations for those of us who are listening, who want to perhaps automate not just some of the operations, but utilize reasonably cheap, if there's such a thing, technology to help drive down fees and make it a bit more economical for us to give our clients the efficiencies that they're looking for. Where do we start?
So that's a very interesting question, and I think again in the context of today's discussion around technology, it does sound overwhelming. It sounds beyond the reach of most people. That's not exactly true. So let me tell you, if you look at, and I want to refer to the Denton's model. You will know that Denton's uses the combination model, which allows for a great deal of autonomy in the locations where they practice the law. In South Africa, for example, we looked at this and said, yes, Denton's, the firm, has invested in technology. It's available, it's freely available to us, but it may not necessarily be market appropriate. And so what we've done is leverage that, but on the other hand, the lowest cost step that we took that was the most successful was in fact to begin an innovation debate in the firm. And the reason that it was most successful was it was not owned by partners and it was not owned by lawyers alone. We went to business services people and we went to the future of law, the younger, the senior associates and the associates. And it was really a discussion of how would you innovate the world? How would you innovate the practice of law? How do you see this firm in South Africa? What does it look like? What does it have to be? Is it more? And it's amazing what they were able to come up with. In fact, through that research, we were able to identify technology advantages that big law firms often miss in the context of, let's say, a Denton's or a similarly sized law firm. So when we look at some of these technologies that we've been able to use, some of them, for example, they charge per use, okay? So there's a cost per use. Some of them, there's a cost per hour. There's a monthly subscription. And when you look at those numbers, it becomes infinitely more affordable and infinitely more, I guess, accessible for law firms almost of any size. I think the point I'm making is that technology has moved on, that we don't need big bags of money. All we need is the firm to make a commitment. And ideally, the right people in the firm to make a commitment. The people, unlike me, that own the future. I am in my future, right? So trying to make decisions about other people's future. So what we did was we made them make those decisions. And I hope, Afolabi, that responds to why it is well within the reach of each and every law firm to begin to deploy the thinking of innovation. And yes, it will be at different levels.
Thank you very much, Noor. Just being given the hurry up, I understand that there's actually only 15 minutes to go to our session. So I'm going to try to race through some of these questions so that in case we have at least 1 or 2 minutes of Q&A, then we'll do that. Murray, you spent 20 years advising firms on strategy and organization. There appears to have been a seismic shift in the way we think about what a law firm is. One can question whether it is a place or a service. So I guess my question is, how has COVID changed the way we think about law firms and deliver legal services? I don't know whether you can give us an abridged answer. Other questions for you.
I can. Well, I'll give you something better than that, Afolabi, because let me just share what the audience voted on this. So I will just see, if I do this correctly, you will now be able to see this on your screen. I think we're very, very guilty of overestimating the short-term challenges of COVID and underestimating the longer-term challenges. As we've heard from every speaker so far, all we're seeing because of COVID is just people embracing change much more quickly. And my one takeaway would be that this is a bit that I'm very serious about and I'm less optimistic about, is the stakes are much higher now. The opportunities are bigger and the risks are bigger. For those law firms that do this well and do this better, there is huge opportunity. And for those that don't, we know it's not going to be a very good future. And we know that the challenge for law firms is that they're a partnership model. And it's all very good us sitting on these webinars every day talking about the opportunities for lawyers, and especially in Nigeria. Unless a group of people that are called partners can agree their way forward, decide what they want to do together, none of this will ever be possible. And there was a question we've got for later, Afolabi, which I'll jump to now, which is, if I was to design the ideal law firm of the future, I would offer you two answers. The first one is the elite law firm run on a partnership model. And I'd be like Chelsea Football Club. For all of the Chelsea fans that are watching today, I'd have the elite lawyers playing at the top of their game. And if I was running that firm, my day-to-day work would be looking after the egos and sensitivities of these bright and able partners. We know that has a future. The big future is really who's going to be able to do those standardized legal services in a way which is profitable. And I don't think that that will work as well within the partnership model, because following up from what Noor said, when I'm talking to groups of partners in law firms and we talk about the investment required in technology, I have to try and look at people and I have to try and guess how old they are. Anyone who's 60 years old is thinking, I hope I can make it to the door and my exit before we have to make that investment and have to change the business. And any partners who are in their 30s have a 30-year career left in legal services. And unless those firms embrace change, they will not have success as a partner going forward. So there's huge opportunities in the partnership model, but if I was to design the ideal law firm going forward, I might just decide to run it under a corporate model without some of the challenges that we get within the partnership. And I don't know if you would agree with that, Afolabi, or not.
I'm not sure I have time to answer that question, no, but Murray, but let me ask you another. Where does the mid-sized firm fit in, or the purely web-based, tech-enabled entity that is offering services remotely?
Yeah.
And a lot of young people out there who could just do it. The playing field seems to have been leveled. So our firm has been working for the last 12 weeks, but
yeah,
I'm not sure that they don't have a very strong future as well, or a hybrid of a firm that is web-based, tech-enabled, as well as one that not just has remote clients, but goes to the office as well. So what happens to them, and what do you think is the potential for that kind of practice?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. With all the strategy work we've done within Nigeria over the years, one thing we see very, very clear, those law firms that are small and specialists can be very, very successful and very profitable. They don't have the high overheads of the larger firms, and they can have a clear focus about what they're trying to do in specialization. We've also seen the development of much larger law firms. You have law firms in Nigeria now with over 100 lawyers, very, very big, and they have the economies of scale required to do some of these things well. What worries me is those law firms, you use the term mid-size, Afolabi, and mid-size is a word I'm not sure what that means from a strategic perspective, because mid-size almost could suggest that they're mid-market. And if I hear a law firm that says we're mid-size, we're mid-market, and we're full service, I don't know what that means within a much more competitive market. So I think those are the firms that actually have the difficulty. Do they try and become bigger and merge and become one of the major firms with the economies of scale? Now, merging firms is like merging culture. It is not an easy thing to do. Or what is absolutely fascinating for me is we see all of the attitudes towards mergers with a global firm or an alliance with a global firm changing in Nigeria. Now, for those law firms that are partner-led, that are coming to the age when they're thinking about their transition, when we look at the dynamics of the market and how competitive it is, it's often the international alliance with a global law firm that's becoming more attractive to those firms. Because if the cost of delivery is higher, the sophistication required is higher. We're hearing from Noor about the technologies they have to hand and the way that his firm was able to plug into that network. I think we will see an increasing speed of internationalization within the Nigerian market. And then it's those mid-size, mid-market, full-service firms that I worry about, because I don't think they're tenable going forward. And on the final point, let's remember that the founders of the Nigerian law firms were exceptional in the way they've built their reputation, they built their practice. They were the rainmakers that probably didn't sleep at all while they were building their practices. And I very rarely see that level of dedication and hunger or requirement from some of the junior partners within those firms, because the junior partners within those firms have been through the good times. When you come into work, you have a document to work at on your desk, you finish it, and then you go home again. So I see this really dangerous situation for a number of law firms that are going through this partner change, and I see them struggling sometimes to find consensus about their way forward. And for those very reasons that we hear about, the gap between the winners and the losers, for me, is becoming much bigger. I'm not sure that answered your question, Afolabi. Did I come close?
Yes, you did. Thank you. You did. Let me ask you this. You talked earlier about the power shift. The clients now control what work is done, who does it, fees to be charged. And of course, I'm generalizing because you talked about high-end work, which of course clients must pay for. But do you have any words of advice for law firm leaders on surviving recessions, acclimatizing post-COVID, and laying the groundwork for long-term success? I know that's the subject of a webinar in itself, but if you can comment in a couple of minutes, because I'm going to bring in Uju, because talking to her, I think a couple of days ago, she seems to have a passion for being able to consult. So, what can you say?
Perfect, Afolabi. I'll answer it very, very quickly. I like the quote from Warren Buffett. No, it's when the tide goes out, you see who is swimming naked. Now is when we're seeing the tensions arising in partnerships between different aspirations, different work levels, different hopes and fears of a partnership. My solution is quite simple. Sit around the table, if only we could now. Sit around the table, have the conversation, ask the difficult questions of each other. What do you want as a partner in law? What's the type of career you want? What type of work do you want? And as a result of that, what do you need from this firm? Because we have to work out what each of us wants from the firm. And if we're looking to retire soon, or do we want the firm to last after us? What are the practice areas we want to develop? And we've all been so busy over the last 20 or 30 years. The work has always come in, and the work has always been surprisingly profitable for law firms. I think people have often tried their best to avoid those conversations amongst a group of entrepreneurs and trying to find out. And the more that people can have those honest conversations at the moment, I think the much better place they will be when they come out of this.
Thanks. Do you have any comments on that?
Absolutely. I think this has been a fantastic session of demonstrating how useful technology is now and in the future. Things have definitely changed, and it will never go back to the way things were. And so if what we've said today hasn't convinced the firms to go look into technology, then what I will add is that clients are also looking into technology. And I mentioned to you separately, Afolabi, that even before the COVID outbreak, one of the things our General Counsel and Dr. Kechiku said was we have to automate our legal services. The way we in-house counsel advise the business has to be automated. Why? Because it has to be quicker, it has to be more efficient, and it has to be comprehensive. And we as lawyers, our eyes can't be everywhere at the same time, but we can set up technology to do just that. So for example, in-house, one of the things that our General Counsel is spearheading is automating our compliance system so that the business can, at the click of a button, know exactly what laws they need to comply with on different projects. And the system also sets up alerts where people have compliance gaps, where there is new regulation. Everything comes to the attention of the business through the system. So I definitely encourage all the firms to look into technology because in-house counsel is doing the same.
I'm going to implore our audience to please try to stay for a few minutes more, perhaps over the 19-minute schedule, because I think we have some interesting questions, especially ones that I'm going to ask Adeleke. And for those of us who are in the audience who may be founders of law firms or leaders of law firms, this should interest you in particular. It's about succession. So Leke, I'd like to talk to you about succession planning. A number of leading law firms that were in existence in my early days of practice no longer exist or are redundant. But out of respect, I'm not going to mention any names. But why do you think founder-led firms have struggled to transition to the next generation? And what are some of the issues, and how can we address
Um, Generally and historically, law firms in Nigeria appear to be built to pass from parents to children. I mean, historically. And this is in a nuclear generation family. The succession agenda is that the offspring is groomed to take over the reins of leadership from the parents. And also, majority of law firms in Nigeria, we also know are sole proprietorship-led, and a chunk of them are modeled under the family business pattern to ensure that the child inherits the law firm. I'll be responding to this question in two definite prisons. I'll be looking at the perspective from the partners, the founders, and I'll also be looking at it from the perspective of a young associate who's looking up the ladder and trying to climb up there and hoping to be like the partners someday. So, I mean, the typical saying is that the way you lay your bed, so you shall lie on it. So I say generally to founders that I believe that succession can never be accidental. It's got to be deliberate, and it has to be intentional by the founders. So founders cannot can sleep one day and wake up and believe that some guys are right behind them and they're going to take over leadership. So it has to be planned, and it has to be structured. There's got to be a goal of the founders to build a legacy firm. And in building the legacy firm, you have to have that succession plan. I believe that the most important factor in trying to have the succession plan by founders is actually the people that you lead, the people that are right behind you. And these are the ones that are working their asses off day and night to be part of your success story. Because without them, pardon my language, because without them, they cannot, you cannot actually achieve the goals that you set out. And you cannot be that top law firm, and you cannot walk away if they are not working those, working those hours. And we also have to reward the hard work of and celebrate the work that is done. And how best can you celebrate the work of the young lawyers, if not to elevate them and try to build them in such a pattern and way that they start to look at the ladder and they see themselves climbing up the ladder intentionally. So for example, you find law firms in other clients or jurisdictions whereby when you come in, you can actually define and know when you can rise to be a senior associate. You know when you can be a partner. If you don't meet it at that certain year, then you may as well just walk out of the door. But in Nigeria, what you find out is that most of these decisions also are emotion driven, and most of the decisions are not spelled out. So you don't have a structure in place whereby associates know and they can define their path within a law firm. You find associates sitting at the door of partnership, and the partners don't want to open the door, right? So you have all of those kind of situations. Then moving on to associates themselves. I think before we move to associates, I think generally in trying to make a succession plan, I think the most effective model, I would say, while Maury thinks that the partnership structure may not do it all, I think that right now, today, as we speak in Nigeria, based on the kind of laws that we have, the most effective model has got to be the partnership structure. It allows for opportunity. It gives room at the top. There's room for expertise and specialization for people. So people they can see the top and it's not completely crowded. It means that you can still get there, right? It means there's still some space. Yes?
Yes, I'm just going to ask the Attorney General to jump in here. So just hold that thoughts, because I just want him to respond to some of the things to talk about succession planning and how he sees it. So presumably some of the things that you've said. And I also want to mention that Noor will have to leave in a couple of minutes. So Noor, thank you very much. Great to have you. And I know that you're...
Much appreciated.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's been my great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very insightful. Thank you.
Yeah. So if I can just ask the Honorable Attorney General to jump in here and let us know how he sees the subject of succession planning with the Nigerian law firms contributing to what Adeleke has said.
I agree with his position, because succession for law firms, or transition from one set of partners to the other in Nigeria, is the exception rather than the norm. I cannot recollect now any of our firms, even the big ones, that has successfully done this. We've largely failed in this regard, I think, because of our mindset, and also, largely because of our mindset. We tend to believe that the partnership or the firm belongs to us, and as such, succession should go to our offsprings, whether or not they have the same desires, the same drive or goals as the founding partners. So that has shackled us a bit, but I believe that, like in all things, change is inevitable upon us. We are seeing the generation of the partners of the big law firms now mostly approaching their 60s and crossing over to some to 65. So in the next couple of years, change must be dawning on them. And I'm sure that they must have a succession plan. And the only way you can have a good succession plan, in my view, in the circumstances we find ourselves, is through partnership. So if you have a partnership that, and again, most of this, the problem with us is that, so most of our partnerships tends to revolve around one person inviting others to come and partner with him. So he's seen largely as the face of the firm, and everybody else is kind of like don't have the same equity in the firm as he does. But one of the things that I think, one of the good things that will come out of this pandemic is that it's going to accelerate changes in succession of firms. And it goes back to some of the things we've said. So if our firms transit from becoming law firms to corporations or to businesses, then succession will not be such a problem. There should be a defined role, a defined scheme for an associate to become a partner, and what time frame this is achievable. It's just like you want to be a senior advocate. So these are the rules, these are the things you need to do, and I think that will help us a great deal. I would also have to take my leave to join another meeting. Thank you all very much for the time given me.
Thank you
very much, Honorable Attorney General. Indeed an honor having you on the program, and great to hear your thoughts on the different subjects. Thank you very much.
Thank you too from me, sir. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, Adeleke, I did cut you short, so please, could you just finish up on what it is that you're saying, because Maury was also supposed to contribute.
Okay, all right, thank you. I was just saying that the partnership structure today has got to be the best kind of structure that would allow founders to be outlived. However, I think, like the Attorney General had mentioned, and which I had penned down here before, is that the minute we start to build and we start to practice law as a business, operate law firm businesses, then what would have is, if we have the kind of reforms that we've spoken about here today, then we would have law firms outliving themselves. One of the reasons why law firms have generally failed is because law firms are owned by partners and they're not owned by investors. Investors keep their eye on the money. For us lawyers, a lot of lawyers, and we all know for a fact, lawyers are not the best business. The craft is, we know how to do the work, but we don't actually follow the money as it were. So I believe that the ways that we can actually ensure that law firms would out themselves. For associates who are looking to take on this baton of leadership, they have to show resilience, they have to show that drive and that willingness to want to take on these responsibilities, because these are things that are very passionate to founders, and they don't just want to hand it over to people without seeing that they have what it takes for them to drive the business forward.
Thanks very much, Adeleke. Your thoughts briefly, because you've been advising international firms that transitioned from their founders one generation to the next, and these firms continue to thrive. So what would you say are the best practices that have long been put into play to ensure continuity? I mean, we've been grappling with it, so what are the...
Well, I've actually been working a lot in Nigeria as well, so when we read in the news about certain law firms transitioning and changing roles, that's probably the projects we've been working on. I've got nothing to add to what Adeleke was saying. Okay. It's a conversation when we get around the table again about what people's aspirations are, what is the legacy, and I'm always surprised that founders are willing to walk away from their businesses without building financial value and bringing in younger partners. The question is, I'm seeing now a very different leadership style. We've passed our period where we had those benevolent dictators running law firms. We're now working more towards consensus. And I'm seeing partners having much more open and honest conversations with each other now than I've had for a long time. We're now understanding each other better because of the current crisis. And I hate to say that partners are now being more human and understanding with each other. And let's just take that conversation into what are the future expectations of the firm and follow some of the process that we were hearing about. I think that'd be a very important thing to do at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Maury. Falabi.
All right, I'm going to try to race through my last two questions because we received quite a number of questions, but I guess we probably won't be able to put them to our panel or put all of them to our panel. But Adeleke, let me just talk about new jobs that may be created as a result of technology getting smarter and smarter. Because when you look at the statistics of how many lawyers graduate from law school every year, over the last 3 years, over 5,000. And there's a limit to where they can go, really. So if technology is taking up, well, according to Murray, almost 40% of the work that lawyers do, the smarter and smarter technologies creating new jobs for lawyers. And I think Murray has alluded to one. I certainly can mention one based on the young team that project managed this event brilliantly. So, but I know that there are others. Adeleke, what new jobs are being created or have been created as a result of technology that we can educate our young audience on?
All right, thank you. Again, you alluded to the fact that average of about 5,000 have been graduated and pumped into the legal market with little or no job opportunities out there, placements within the corporates and the legal law firms. Generally, we also know for a fact that technology, smart contracts, electronic legal analysis tools, etc., have come to take in some of these young lawyers' responsibilities in law firms. And even though McKinsey says it's 23%, it's 40%, opportunities are taken away. I believe to start with, the first conversation has got to be the kind of training that the young lawyers get or that they have before they get into the market. And that's where the conversation really starts from. We need to start to prepare the young lawyers for a different world out there. The world has completely changed, and that's the reality. Whether we like it or not, we can define it the way we used to define it, but the world has changed. So right from the training opportunities that are available in law school, the curriculum has got to change. And so that we start to prepare them for the real world, which is the new world that we all are in now, this new abnormal. And in terms of job opportunities that have been created, the truth is, whilst you may not be able to find those placements out there, the traditional law firms also have a disadvantage of skill sets in certain niche areas. Like today, data protection has become a niche area. Find lawyers and young lawyers building expertise and learning and doing all sorts of things within this space. We have media, technology. These are niche areas for lawyers. I believe that for the young lawyers, by creating opportunities for them, starting from the law school, such that they get a bit more exposed to some of these things and not the traditional pattern of learning and focusing on law, then they can tend to build expertise and niche opportunities for themselves. And like you also mentioned, if you look at the kind of skills that lawyers have managed to build within themselves today, either we find lawyers that are coding, you find lawyers that are web developers, that are doing many other things. These are things that lawyers can pay a lot more attention to within and outside the technology space.
All right, so Leke, what you're saying is that young lawyers need to upskill, but unfortunately they're not getting the appropriate training in the Nigerian law school, who are probably still teaching the same legal doctrine they were teaching when I was at law school more than probably 30 years ago. So that needs to be changed. But I'm sure that there are other avenues for them to start learning about some of these allied skills that they need. Well, I made a quick list of a couple based on my research. I mean, marketing, for example, we have to market in a different way. And I know that some firms have a legal digital market specialist. So that should be water for ducks back for some of the young people. Project management, you mentioned data privacy specialist. There's process analysts. Murray mentioned those who deconstruct, and then what they do is that they automate to save time, to save their firms time and money. So that's another skill. You have the legal knowledge engineer who creates online question and answers, gives relevant information and produces legal documents. So technology is allowing people who are going to think more broadly that there are opportunities for them to specialize in other things that are not necessarily related to practicing law. I think that I'm getting a signal that we do need to close. So a number of questions have been sent to us, but if I can just ask that our panelists will provide their email addresses so that some of the questions that we can't put to you today are sent to you, that would be great. Before I ask these questions, and I've limited them to two, I'm afraid, is there a closing remark that you would like to make? If you could just give us one practical takeaway each, something that you believe that our audience can take away from this session that will be of practical assistance to them, that would be great. I'll start with you, Murray.
Yeah, my feeling would be there's nothing unusual about change. It's inevitable. It's just that at the moment in Nigeria, we have a lot of things happening at the same time. We've got the law firms that are more traditional, becoming more modern. We've got a difficult economic situation. And in the middle of that, we've got COVID appearing. So everything that we see globally, we see happening in Nigeria. And if we're optimists, we think that change is happening quicker than expected. And if we're pessimists, we might feel a little bit uncomfortable about. The key is there's opportunities and there are risks, and people just have to be clear about what their opportunities are. And partners have to be better at talking to each other and deciding what they want to do. We started off by hearing from the clients, and if anybody is in any doubt about what's required from their law firm, they can do nothing better than to speak to their clients and understand exactly what they need. Your clients will help you make your firm get better, and your clients will even help you redesign your firm and be more successful going forward. Thank you very much.
Very helpful, thank you. Uju, any final thoughts?
Yes, of course. So the key things for firms to keep in mind is, remember, the market is now driven by So tap into the business objective of your client and show your client that you are committed to those objectives. And don't worry about the current climate of more for less. There will be down times where your client focuses more on fees than the value of your services. But there will also be times when your client's business is thriving and fees will no longer be the driver, and it will be the quality of your advice. But from a client's perspective, one thing to keep in mind is that clients will remember the firms that were committed to them during the downturn. When liquidity was low, what value add, non-fee-based services did you render to show the client that you're above just hitting your bottom line and you are committed to seeing that they are successful? And don't forget about people development within your firms. It's important for the continuity of your firms. When a partner isn't around, can clients still count on your firm to deliver? How are you developing your young lawyers? And I buy into 100% what Adeleke said about the law school needing a more practical approach to learning. Coming from a US-based legal education, what I can say was very valuable was the in-house counsel and lawyers from law firms come and take a few classes. So they brought their practical experience to the law school, and they will give you live cases and how they have solved those cases. So perhaps that is an angle for the law school to explore to get young students ready for a real life legal practice.
Thank you very much, Juju. And I was going to ask Leki, but Leki, you know, we've decided that we will take just 2 questions, and the 2 questions out of the number of questions we've received are for all of the panelists. So I'll read them both, and then you can decide which one you prefer to answer. Might be the first. The future of the legal profession is in the next generation of lawyers. What are the measures each panel member will recommend to promote clinical legal education to raise a new generation of lawyers? That's one question. Or, how do we encourage law firms to merge? That's the second question.
Who's going first, Afolabi? Who'd you like to go first? Who are you going to point to?
I was going to ask Leki, as part of his final remarks.
Good idea.
Would you read them again, or can you say question 1 or 2? And
I'll take question 2.
Question 2: how do we encourage law firms to merge?
Yes, I'll take question 2 because I'm an advocate of building big practices. I believe that we do not have the big practices yet in Nigeria. We do not have the 200, 500-man law firm yet in Nigeria, but we can actually build it. I believe the future of the legal practice has got to be the M&A that we advise clients on every day, that we preach every day, we write the best documents on. We need to write it on ourselves. We need to be able to put mid-sized law firms, even though Maury feels that the mid-sized law firms can do it, we need to be able to put the mid-sized law firms together to form the big law firms. And that is going to be the future of the practice, so that we can actually consolidate efforts and consolidate practices together to have what Maury feels and says, and I agree with him, is a full-service law firm. That's for me. And my closing line is that if we do not...
Okay, I need to press you on the question, though. They want at least one tip. So how do we encourage law firms to merge? Do you have any suggestion, any one suggestion?
How do we encourage them to merge?
Yeah, that's the question, really. I can throw it open. Anybody?
I mean, I'll throw it open, but I think it's all conversation. The deliberate, again, it goes back to succession planning somewhat, because if there's a deliberate part if the deliberate effort on the part of the founders and the partners to build a practice that will grow and that is big enough, then you would have conversations about it. You start to pull yourselves together and try to consolidate practices that you do not have, and try to build and try to make a bigger law firm out of small law firms.
Yeah, I would agree. If I can jump in with my one closing remark, Afolabi, would be that that merger isn't a strategy, that you have to decide what you want to be, and then you have to find the people to bring into the firm to do that. If it's an opportunity to develop a tax practice or new technologies practices, decide what you want first, decide the practices you need, and then go and find and have those conversations. Unfortunately, many of the law firms that look at merger, it's a bit like a sick child. They're not doing very well and they look to merge. Sometimes they merge with other sick children. I mean, you get two sick children in the cot together, it's not going to be a good future. Sometimes those sick children find a healthy law firm to merge with. And when you put your sick child in bed with the healthy child, we know that's not going to work out well. So merge, it's nothing straightforward. It's nothing simple. It's just you have to decide what the direction you want to get in and whether you'll get there quickly by merging with other firms. And there's a business case, and then there's finding out whether these are people you trust and want to do business with. The beauty of the partnership, because I think there are some very positive things about the partnership, is that you have to work with people you trust and respect. And we would never be able to underestimate the importance of the working with people that you respect and only thinking about merging with people you get on with. Because if you do it badly, you'd risk destroying your own firm and your own culture inside.
All right. Thank you very much. Did you want to answer any of the two questions?
I'll take the first one since we haven't addressed that one.
I'll read it. The future of the legal profession is in the next generation of lawyers. What are the measures each panel member will recommend to promote clinical legal education to raise a new generation of lawyers?
Okay, so I think the answer to that is part of what I said earlier about what the law school education is like in the US. One of the things that I'm hoping the new administration of the Nigerian Bar Association will look into is the ways in which we can improve or maybe even introduce clinical legal education in our law school, which is calling on more in-house counsel and lawyers firms to volunteer to run classes in law school. It could be a semester-long, year-long arrangement, but we need people on the field, such as ourselves, to step up and recognize that the future of the law practice is in these young students and play a hand in grooming them and getting them ready to take over the future.
I think we'll close now. I think that my own final tip would be that I see law as a business more than a profession. I know that there are those that feel that it's more legal practice and it's more of a profession, but you can't run it efficiently if you don't think differently, whether there's COVID or no COVID. So for the young lawyers, I know the sort of training I got at law school was very, very narrow. You need certainly allied skills to be able to succeed in the, I guess, in the way that the legal industry, the legal market is transforming. And because it's also contracted in terms of competition, then you need to broaden your skill set. And there are many opportunities to do so even outside law school. If you can't get experiential training, then the world's best library is there, which is the internet. And there are online courses. There's so many different ways in which you can educate yourself about so many things. And today, the lawyer of tomorrow is not just somebody who understands the black letter of the law, which is par for the course, which is standard, but somebody who understands a little bit about business, somebody who understands, maybe even can read a balance sheet, somebody who knows if they don't know technology, they know where to find the technology. So all these allied skills come into play. And that is how one should project one's mind and be open to thinking differently. On that note, let me just extend my personal thanks to everybody that has joined this webinar. Apologize sincerely for having gone beyond the stipulated time. I hope that you found it interesting. I hope you found some practical takeaways. I certainly did. Thank you to all of our panelists, because we got all this very, very useful information free of charge. And I know how much it would normally cost if we had to engage you. So it's a big thank you from me. Thank you to the audience again. Thank you to the team that put this together at ACAS-Law. And Kemi, I'm handing back over to you.
Thank you very much, Falabi. Certainly a most interesting discussion. Thank you to the panelists, for staying over time. And we still have a very large audience. Thank you very much. So I'll just wrap up in about 2 minutes, 2.5. I believe the message today is that the traditional ways of practice are clearly aging, and the modern way to practice, the modern ways of practice are taking over. We have to be open to change. Otherwise, if we are not, we may reduce in relevance. Within the message of the need to adapt and modernize for the legal industry, I think some of the takeaways today are on how best to collaborate with in-house counsel, understanding that one of our key strategies must be to be able to offer more for less, being cost efficient, competitive, and perhaps a more open and therefore more challenging market. And we've heard what the AG and others have had to say on that. So it's clear that modernizing the administration of our judicial system is necessary in order for us to effectively and efficiently serve its purpose. So we have heard about the steps we need to take to achieve the requisite reforms, as well as the actions that have already been taken, at least, in Lagos State. And I trust it's also clear that legal technology is not just a nice thing to have, it's an essential requirement to the directed transitioning of our legal industry. So we must shape up. I think the impact